Picture this, it is 1925. You are standing on the terraces at a freezing English football ground, breath visible in the cold air, and the striker from the opposing team has been camped, literally camped, in front of your goalkeeper for the entire match. He has not moved, he has not pressed, he has not tracked back once, he is just waiting, and waiting, and waiting, because under the rules of football at that moment, that is a completely legal strategy. And here is what nobody tells you about the offside rule. The version you curse at on a Saturday afternoon nearly destroyed football before it ever had a chance to become the sport you love. Let that sink in for a second. The most debated, most misunderstood, most VAR scrutinized rule in all of football was not always there. And when the game played without it, the results were so catastrophic, so dull, so mathematically broken, that the people running the sport had no choice but to intervene or watch the whole thing collapse. To understand why the offside rule exists, you have to go back to where football came from, and it does not start on a pitch. It starts in a school. In the early 1800s, football in England was not one game. It was dozens of different games played at different schools, each with their own house rules. At Eton, you could not use your hands. At rugby, you could. At Winchester, you could run with the ball forward. At some schools, attackers lurking near the opponent's goal were considered illegal. At others, it did not matter at all. The concept of what we now call offside was not a universal law. It was chaos wrapped in a school uniform. When the Football Association was founded in 1863 and the first formal rules were written down, they needed to decide what to do about players who simply loitered near the opposition goal, waiting for the ball. The decision they made was aggressive. Under the original 1863 FA rules, a player was offside if they were ahead of the ball at any point between themselves and the opposition goal, and there were fewer than 3 opponents between them and that goal. 3 opponents, not 2. 3. Think about what that means. 3 players standing between an attacker and the goal. That is nearly impossible to beat with a simple through ball. To stay onside, your entire attack had to be patient, methodical, almost pedestrian, and that created a different kind of problem, because now defenders figured out the trap. William McCracken, a goalkeeper from Ireland, is usually credited with inventing the penalty kick in 1890. But the man who invented the offside trap, the deliberate, organized stepping up to catch attackers, has no statue, no Wikipedia page with his face on it, because it was not one man. It was a collective realization that spread through defensive football like a virus. If 3 players had to be between an attacker and the goal, then all you had to do was step forward at the right moment and the entire attack became illegal. Instantly. No physical contest required. By the early 1900s, this was not an occasional trick. It was a system. Defenders were stepping up in coordinated lines, waving their arms, pointing at linesmen, doing what we now recognize as the offside trap. Only with a 3-man rule, it was devastatingly effective. Games slowed to a crawl. Attacking football became a war of attrition against a law that physically prevented forward thinking. And then came Newcastle United's Bill McCracken. McCracken was a fullback, a brilliant, calculating fullback who played for Newcastle from 1904 to 1923, and he turned the offside trap into an art form so refined, so cynical, so effective that it was practically the only reason to watch his team play. If you enjoyed watching attacking football die in real time, McCracken and his defensive partner Frank Hudspeth operated like a machine. The moment an opposition player received the ball and looked forward, McCracken stepped up. 1 step. The whole attack, offside. The linesman's flag went up. Another move killed before it started. Crowds did not just groan. They booed. They jeered. There are documented reports of spectators blowing whistles from the stands to mock the referee's constant stoppages. Arsenal Stadium, Highbury, reportedly had fans throwing programs onto the pitch in frustration after McCracken-style traps wrecked another promising attack. The Football Association had a numbers problem, and the numbers were alarming. In the 1924 to 1925 season, last full season played under the 3-man offside rule, the total number of goals scored across the entire English Football League was 4,700. That sounds reasonable until you compare it to what happened next. In 1925, after months of debate, the FA changed the rule. The 3-man requirement was reduced to 2. Now only 2 opponents needed to be between an attacker and the goal for the player to be onside. 2. That meant the goalkeeper counted, which meant for a forward to be offside, only 1 outfield defender needed to be behind them. The trap became exponentially harder to set. Defenders could no longer just step up in a line and make the attack disappear. You had to actually defend. The 1925 to 1926 season, the first under the new rule, 6,373 goals scored in the English Football League. That is an increase of over 1,600 goals, in one season from one rule change. Football exploded, but here's the counterintuitive twist. The rule change did not just create more goals, it created an entirely new problem that nobody had anticipated, because now attackers could roam further forward than ever before. Defenses were suddenly exposed in ways they had never experienced. Teams that had relied on the trap were conceding at terrifying rates. The 1925 to 1926 season also saw some of the highest individual scores in English football history, matches that looked less like football and more like basketball played on grass. And into this chaos stepped a man named Herbert Chapman. Chapman was the manager of Arsenal, meticulous, visionary, difficult in the best possible way. He looked at the new offside rule and did not panic. He adapted. He pulled his center half, traditionally an attacking midfielder, back into a deep defensive role between the two fullbacks, creating what became known as the WM formation. A third center back, covering the gap the new rule had opened up. Chapman essentially invented the modern defensive shape to solve the problem that the offside rule change had created. Within 5 years, Arsenal were the dominant team in England. Within a decade, the WM formation was everywhere, and the tactics you see today, the flat back four, the offside line, the high defensive press, all of them trace a direct line back to that 1925 rule change and the tactical arms race it triggered. That is what a single rule adjustment did to football. It did not just change the law, it changed the shape of the game entirely. Now fast forward to your living room. It is 2023. VAR is on the screen. The assistant referee has drawn a line through a player's armpit. A goal has been disallowed because a single pixel of a forward's shoulder was ahead of a defender's heel. The pundits are furious. The fans are furious. You are furious. And here's the thing. The debate has not changed. Not really. In 1863, the argument was, how do we stop players camping near the goal? In 1925, the argument was, how do we stop defenders making attacking football impossible? In 2023, the argument is, how do we stop a technology so precise that it punishes players for the natural mechanics of the human body? The rule that was created to protect attacking football, to keep the game flowing, to reward the forward who timed their run perfectly, is now the same rule that freezes stadiums for 4 minutes, while cameras measure millimeters. The offside rule has become so refined, so obsessively policed, that it is circling back around to the original problem. Exciting attacks are being stopped. Goals are being disallowed. Crowds are groaning. William McCracken stepped forward on a frozen Tyneside pitch. The linesman raised his flag. The crowd booed. 100 years later, a monitor in Zurich draws a line through an attacker's collarbone. The VAR official raises the flag. The crowd boos. Different century. Same rule. Same argument. Same football. And now you will never watch an offside call the same way again.